In this video, we'll be learning a new subjunctive clause, the cum clause, also known as the descriptive or circumstantial cum clause. To this point in Latin, when we've seen cum in a translation, we assume it's the preposition that takes the ablative, meaning with. But cum can also be used as a conjunction, meaning when, once, after, or while. So when you see cum and it's not followed by an ablative, you're going to most likely translate it as when. Time clauses with ubi, postquam, and cum. When the words ubi, postquam, and the conjunction form of cum are used with verbs that are in the imperfect, perfect, or past perfect indicative, and that's very important that these verbs must be in the indicative mood, the clause will indicate the time in which inaction has occurred. So the indicative mood, it tells you the time. And so here are some examples. When you were seeing this, you left. After you saw this, you left. When you had seen this, you left. And these all indicate the time that you are leaving. So when the conjunction cum is used with the imperfect or past perfect subjunctive, and notice cum clauses or descriptive or circumstantial cum clauses will only use the imperfect and past perfect subjunctive. So these are in the subjunctive mood. The clause is used to describe the circumstance in which an action took place. So the difference with the indicative, it just tells you the time, like the time that it happened. When you use the cum plus the subjunctive, it's the circumstance that it happens. Because you're in this certain circumstance or this description, this is why this action happened. So let's look at a couple examples. So cum in venies Athenas iter fecerunt. And so this first part is the cum clause. So when the two young men were on the way, and so the circumstance was that they were on the way, they saw many Romans. So this is not indicating time. This is indicating what they were doing, the circumstance. They were making a journey, they were on their way. Next one, cum duo amici multas magistros adevissent. And so the circumstances when the two friends had listened to many teachers, and so this is the circumstance, not the time, but because they had listened to many teachers, they chose encurio. So again, cum, and I know it's splitting hairs and it's a little gray, but when you use cum plus the subjunctive, the author or the writer is trying to indicate the circumstance, not the time. The time is cum or postquam or ubi plus the indicative. So different ways to translate cum in the subjunctive. So cum plus the subjunctive can always be translated as when. So whether you're using the imperfect subjunctive or the past perfect subjunctive, you can translate it as when. So when in doubt, when you're using cum in a time clause or a cum clause, translate it as when. However, there are more specific translations that you can use that are appropriate for each tense. So in the imperfect, you can translate it as while, as well as when. And in the past perfect, along with when, you can say translate it as once or after. But when in doubt, translate it as when. Now we're going to expand our sequence of tenses. So remember, the tense of the verb in the subjunctive clause depends on the tense of the verb in the main clause, the indicative clause. And they call them primary and secondary tenses. And so your primary tenses for the indicative are present, future, and future perfect. So if in the main verb in the indicative tense is present, future, or future perfect, you'll use the present or perfect subjunctive in the subjunctive clause. Your secondary tenses in the indicative are anything that's happened in the past. They're all your past tenses. Your imperfect, your perfect, and past perfect. And so if the indicative verb or the main verb is imperfect, perfect, or past perfect, you will always use either an imperfect or past perfect subjunctive in your subjunctive clause.